Now, next to one of the biggest name guests we've had on Sunday Politics, Gary Lightbody, the lead singer of the internationally successful band Snow Patrol, has called on the Stormont Executive to increase its funding for the arts, especially in terms of the support it provides to artists at the start of their careers. He called the current lack of investment in the creative industries here short-sighted. I spoke to him last week.
Over the last 10 years, arts funding has been cut from 20 million to under 10 million. In Northern Ireland. The Republic of Ireland spent the equivalent of £25 per head on the arts. Wales spent £10 per head on the arts. Northern Ireland spends £5 per head on the arts. It's time to try and correct that, because it just keeps seeming like the arts funding gets cut 10% every year. It's gone from 20 to 10, under 10 million.
What do those figures, Gary, say to you about the government's appreciation of the arts, understanding of how the arts works, and I suppose ultimately commitment to the arts here in Northern Ireland?
It's an underappreciation, to say the least. I think that our government perhaps has a view that arts will just take care of itself. But so they're all over there, just making music or TV shows or whatever we're doing, or writing plays or whatnot. We're the self-cleaning oven. That doesn't take into consideration all the institutions that require that funding to keep going, like the Lyric Theatre or the Ulster Orchestra, and all the artists that require some help with projects at the very first stage of those projects. New artists making art maybe for the first time, or in their first sort of forays into creating. Sometimes they need a little bit of help here and there, just as we all people do from time to time. And then post-COVID as well, or during COVID, so many artists quit. So we lost so many artists, musicians, people left bands, they didn't come back, they went and became delivery drivers or whatever it was they did. They weren't making art anymore. And we set up a group during COVID, 7 of us in the music industry, and lots of different arts set up their own groups, and we were petitioning the government all the way through that to try and get funding, to try and release more funding for artists. And we were somewhat successful at certain moments, but it's still a massive deficit as compared to not just other countries but everything else. And obviously really vital and important services that should be above the arts. Education and healthcare and infrastructure, all these things are vitally important so that we can survive. But we also need reasons to live and reasons to have joy in this world. And I think art is something that brings people so much joy, and it's probably the main thing other than sport.
But yet some people still see it clearly as a luxury. I mean, in that speech you gave at the Arts Council event, you talked about imagining a world without the arts and what that would look like. And it was a fairly bleak picture that you painted.
It is a fairly bleak picture without art. And if you think about all the arts, right, poetry, all the poetry, prose, playwriting, singing, dancing, theatre, orchestra, take all of that away. Where do you go? Where does anybody go? Like, what do you do when you need to feel connected to something in your darkest moments? Music has always been the thing for me. Music has always been that voice that has risen above all the other voices in my head, which I've spoken about in other interviews and I don't need to go into here, but it's always been that life raft for me, and I think it is for so many people. And we're very short-sighted as a country, as a community, as a people, as a place, if we don't at least respect the arts to the value that it's being respected in other places. And just to be 100% clear, when I'm talking about funding for the arts, I don't mean people like me or people that are doing well. I'm talking about people that aren't and can't possibly do it any other way other than getting a little bit of funding. And I've seen the funding through COVID, like seeing the applications for artists to apply for funding, and it's a many page document that most artists didn't have. I wouldn't have had a clue how to fill in even. So it's not easy even to get the money if it's available. So it's not like something that's just being dished out, you know, to anybody that sort of puts their hand up. It is it's a process that everybody, an artist, will have to go through, even if there is funding available.
Do you think it's easier to make that argument because the sums of money involved are actually quite small? Because the arts gets less in a year than health spends in a day. So a very small rebalance in the overall budget could potentially make a huge difference to arts organisations. So you set that on the one hand against the fact that, you know, we've heard successive health ministers here saying they need an extra 300 million, 400 million pounds a year just to stand still. And that leads people to say, well, we can't afford to be giving money to the arts because we need so much money for health or education or infrastructure, as you've said. And yet a tiny little amount would transform the arts landscape in a place like Northern Ireland.
It would be nice to see, and again, I just have to reiterate, I totally agree that those are the most important things in a society. We have to keep everybody alive, we have to educate, and we have to try and house as many people as possible. All these things are vitally important. But you know, I think we, as you say, a little bit of money, especially as comparative to everything else, would change an awful lot of lives, an awful lot of musicians and artists and creators' lives. And if we could even have parity per capita with Wales, for example, it would be, you know, that's the first goal, I think, is to try and get some parity with Wales, because I feel like that should be the lowest limit of where we're at.
And Wales is spending £10 per capita on arts funding at the moment. We're spending £5 per capita.
Yeah.
So a doubling.
It's a long way to go.
Yeah,
it's back 10 years ago.
It's a long way to go, but we're moving backwards actually.
Yeah.
And as you said, compared to the Republic, it's over £20 per capita. We are trailing behind, and the strange thing about that is that it's often said, isn't it, that Northern Ireland punches above its weight as far as the arts are concerned. I mean, people like yourself, it's a long list, Van Morrison, Liam Neeson, Ciarán Hinds, Seamus Heaney, Kenneth Branagh, Game of Thrones, the list goes on and on. So on the one hand, we produce people who really punch above their weight, and yet government funding is lower here than it is anywhere else on these islands. It's a hard thing to get your head around, isn't it?
It is a hard thing to get your head around, and I wonder whether that is one of the reasons why it is, because we seem to do quite well anyway, and that doesn't tell the whole story. There's so many artists that just with a little bit of help, they wouldn't have to move on to something else and leave art behind them. I know so many incredible artists that have had to do that, especially during COVID times. And there's speaking as a musician, and I don't mean to single out music, it's just because I am one, there's so many extraordinary artists, musicians, bands in Northern Ireland at the moment. We have an incredible array, and I know that there's so many that could do with some small help to get them to that next level, and it's very lacking.
So you took to the stage at the Arts Council event and you said what you said. You've kindly agreed to take part in our conversation again, which hopefully will bring these issues to the attention of more people. I just wonder what else you think you might be able to do. Where do you go from here? You've got a platform, you're using that platform. You obviously know a lot of people, you're well connected. There are people who really care about this. What else do you think you might be able to do?
I mean, we're sitting in the OES Centre, a place that myself and Stuart Bailey founded more than 15 years ago. We created this place with the help of an awful lot of people. This is what happens when. This is the great thing about arts in Northern Ireland is that when people collaborate, people get together, people want to help each other. This is not a problem one person can solve. This is a problem that a government should be helping with, and this is there's so many people in Northern Ireland that are giving so much to the arts. It's just we need a little bit of help from the government.
But in engaging in this debate, in raising your head above the parapet, you now have a platform that you might be able to do something with. I mean, for example, would you sit down if the invitation came your way from the Arts Minister, Gordon Lyons, to talk to him, to try to persuade him about how he might look at things a little bit differently, which of course in turn might help him when he's sitting down with his executive colleagues making a demand for better arts funding? Would you play a part in that conversation if you were invited to?
Absolutely. I've said this many times, I'll say it again. I am not an expert in anything. But any help,
well, that makes two of us.
Any help that I can give for the arts community in Northern Ireland, they always know. I think they all know that I'm here anytime, and I would gladly speak to the Arts Minister, to the Communities Minister, Gordon Lyons, and have a conversation about how maybe we, what the future looks like.
Because you obviously believe you would have a persuasive case to make.
I believe that there is a persuasive case to make that the arts brings so much to any society, to any culture. It is a vital part of what makes us, us. For all the arguments that we may have, the thing that brings us together is art and music. And just watch people at a gig, then nobody cares where they're from or what their background is. They're all singing the same song together at the same time, and that's a beautiful thing for this country.
I've certainly heard people say the arts manages to do very well despite the lack of support that it gets. Just imagine what it could do if it was shown a bit of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it really in a nutshell, isn't it?
100%.
Gary Lightbody speaking to me at the Oh Yeah Centre in Belfast. Let's bring Freya back into the conversation. You'd just love to be a fly on the wall if Gordon Lyons does invite Gary Lightbody up for a coffee and a chat to Stormont, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I mean, Gary is such a great advocate for the arts. You'd really like to see that meeting happen, and it makes you wonder, what is possible if you have people like Gary, other people who are prominent in the arts, people like Lisa McGee, Derry Girls, one of the best known experts from Northern Ireland. If you got a crowd of people like that up to Stormont and really making the case for the arts to the Minister, because they're not asking for much. When you look at the figures in terms of the spending per head in Northern Ireland, it is so small, particularly when you compare it to the rest of the UK, when you compare it to the Republic of Ireland. They're not asking for much, but yet the benefits can be so great.
Yeah, and just to recap on those numbers again, £5 per head of the population in Northern Ireland compared to £10 in Wales and nearly £22 in the Republic of Ireland. You can't really argue with that. It's pretty stark.
Yeah, and there is no excuse for that. And again, Gary made the arguments really well in that interview. When he talked about how, the arts brings joy in this world. For me, it's the difference between living life in 2D in a flat world and living it in 3D with all the experiences, with all the colour that can bring. There really is no excuse for such small amounts of money being spent on that, because we're not just talking about the impact on people like Gary Lightbody who've been successful. We're actually talking about how you create the climate whereby we get the next generation of Gary Lightbody or Lisa McGee's or whoever else. And that starts with spending on the arts that reaches down to the level of school children, that reaches down to the level of people who maybe wouldn't think to go to a concert or go to a play or something like that. It's about letting that filter through society and then seeing those effects. And it's about understanding as well, I think, because it's a very complex landscape. It's about understanding how the arts actually can be an economic driver. And I think a lot of people maybe don't fully grasp that. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I keep talking about Derry Girls, and it's far from the only example, but a very practical example of that. The Tower Museum in Derry has an exhibition devoted to Derry Girls. They've had their best year ever because of that. And that's international tourism, that's hotel nights, that's spend in the city, that's hospitality spend. But I think we have to be wary about only looking at arts through the prism of the financial benefit, the emotional benefit, the benefit to well-being, so much more. OK. Good to talk to you, Freya, as ever. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we've time for.